Hello, my name is Kirioth, and today we are going to talk about what I consider to be Games Workshop's biggest narrative mistake. And now this is taking into account things like the existence of Caldor Drago, for instance. So it's a pretty big narrative mistake that, frankly, I don't know whether they can or even would properly attempt to rectify. And that is the Primarchs themselves. Not specifically the Loyalist Primarchs, because for the most part, the Loyalist Primarchs are taken care of in terms of their narrative. They have either disappeared into the warp, and so the webway, well, webway as well, or been killed, or been placed into stasis, or, various things have happened to kind of explain why Loyalist Primarchs at least went away for quite some time. And those explanations, though they can be seen as being a little bit lacking in fleshed outness, which is a terrible way of putting it, but you get what I mean. It kind of works in the context of the Warhammer 40k universe. The scale is so vast and the stories are so over the top that you can kind of get round that sort of thing with the just size and feel of the characters and battles that take place in that universe. No, the big problem, the biggest narrative mistake that Games Workshop I think has ever made, and that I think the authors for Games Workshop have such a hard job, dealing with, is the traitor Primarchs. Because the traitor Primarchs are in a bizarre and ridiculous situation for the most part that is almost completely unexplainable when they return. If they return, which, let's face it, they probably all will. That is that they have done approximately naff all for ages. And it frankly makes no sense, is the biggest problem. If you think about what the Traitor Primarchs have actually done, what they've actually achieved in their exile from the Imperium, in their abandonment of the Emperor's grand vision, it basically boils down to they have sat around doing essentially nothing for thousands of years. Now, we're not talking occasionally stepped out, went on a massive raid, killed a load of Imperium citizens, but found that their connection to the warp meant they couldn't go any further. No, we're talking just flat out did nothing. Anything that they have done, frankly, is not going to fit with the timescale of how long they've been away, and that's the problem. This is the thing that I feel has really had a frustrating effect on the cause of the Heretic Astartes altogether, like on the cause of chaos, because you have these insanely powerful demigods who are now like demonic entities as well, and having been given power by the Chaos Gods, having been granted a ridiculous amount of strength and ability, they have just sort of sat there a bit, maybe got a bit angry about it, got a bit unhappy. I mean, Fulgrim almost gets a pass because, let's face it, when you are a demon Primarch whose power came from Slaanesh, you kind of, you're covered for anything you want to do, because let's face it, you'll want to do everything, and that is understandable. However, Lorgar especially, it kills me. It absolutely kills me the way that Lorgar has been handled. Out of all the Traitor Primarchs, I think Lorgar is the one that has had the most kind of inadvertent screwing over. Lorgar managed to prove the existence of gods. He managed to actually get those gods to give him power. He found the truth behind the universe, the truth that he had been seeking for his entire life, and whilst it wasn't a particularly pleasant truth, it was the truth nonetheless. Having learned all of this, having mastered the warp, the power of chaos itself, he went and he's been locked away in meditation for thousands of years. No attempt outside of turning against the Emperor. No attempt to actually spread the faith to humanity any further. No attempt to bring this truth to humanity as a whole. No grand crusade. No attempt to actually sway humanity as a whole over to his cause. Just kind of sat there praying as if he needs to anymore at this point, given his status, given who he is, given what he is. Does he actually need to dedicate himself in the form of meditation to the dark gods, or would he be better served actually attempting to bring them more power, bring them more servants, more sacrifices, by taking the word bearers out en masse, because the word bearers were a significant legion in terms of their size, and actually, maybe make a genuine attempt to convert the Imperium as a whole. He hasn't done that. There are similar issues with just every Demon Primarch, and I genuinely think that in terms of the grand scale, like the grand scheme of Warhammer 40k and its underlying storyline, the way that the Demon Primarchs were handled in comparison to the way the Loyalist Primarchs were handled is the biggest narrative mistake that Games Workshop could have made. Now, of course, at the time of writing all of this stuff, Games Workshop will have had no idea that they would have a 59 long, is it 58 or 59 long book series covering the events of the Horus Heresy. They wouldn't know that necessarily. They wouldn't be planning that way back when. The way that the Loyalists are handled, it's not ideal, but it is better. Whilst there is a certain amount of kind of suspension of disbelief required as to why the Emperor's loyal sons would suddenly decide to just piss off and do whatever they like, whilst their father's empire was basically recovering from having the absolute shit kicked out of it, that requires, as I say, a bit of suspension of disbelief. But it was done in the cause of vengeance, in the cause of hunting down their brothers. It was done out of senses of guilt or shame. It was at least emotions and reasons that you can get behind in terms of what that character would do. Feasible reasons. Maybe not the best reasons, but feasible nonetheless. In the case of the Traitor Primarchs, though, there doesn't seem to be a sensible, feasible reason. It goes from the desire to overthrow the Emperor and install Horus on the throne to, I've lost Horus. Let's just leave. Let's go. I mean, obviously, there are more complicated factors behind it than that when it comes to the war that ensued between the Traitor Primarchs and the Imperium. But at the very end of it, when all's said and done, when the bullets have been fired and the casualties are lying there, the Traitor Primarchs just kind of disappeared. And they didn't disappear to achieve some sort of grand goal. They didn't disappear to create a new strength, to come back better than ever. They just kind of disappeared. And now they are starting to come back. And now we are seeing Magnus, we're seeing Mortarion, we're going to see, obviously, other Traitor Primarchs as well. I still think Angron is probably going to be the next one that we see. But their reasons for being absent for so long and their motivations for being absent for so long don't really fit with what they were doing before they disappeared. And it's such a hard thing to actually explain and recover from. How do you adequately explain why someone with that amount of power and that amount of drive just does nothing for that long? It's a hole that I don't know whether you can reasonably expect the current writers to actually... I don't know how you're supposed to get those characters out of that hole. I don't know how you're supposed to make it believable, give them a compelling and sensible and believable reason for disappearing the way they did and doing nothing for as long as they did. I mean, yeah, Pachurabo has done a little bit. Angron has at least gone out and murdered millions upon millions of people on Armageddon. But in the grand scheme of things, the Traitor Primarchs as a whole just kind of went a bit lame. They just didn't push it. They didn't do anything. They didn't actually achieve anything with their strength. And now thousands of years later, yes, they are making a comeback. They are attempting to do something again. But at this point, the distance, the time, just the sheer scale is so off for what they are and what their goals were that in hindsight, looking back, it does seem like a serious narrative error to actually have them go away the way they did, because it doesn't fit with what their personalities were or what they were aiming to do. So, in the grand scheme of things, that I think is Games Workshop's biggest narrative mistake. I will say that I think the Horus Heresy is doing a fantastic job as a series of spelling everything out and actually, fleshing out all of that series of events. For the most part, they are very well written and very good books. And I think aside from a little bit of advertising feel that I got from Dark Imperium, I thought Dark Imperium did a fairly good job of describing the mindset of a Primarch who has returned. It is doable, maybe, but it's not easy to recover from something that is that glaring and that big, in my opinion. So, yeah, that is what I think Games Workshop's biggest narrative mistake has ever been. What's yours? Do you think there's something worse than that, something bigger than that? Is there some gigantic plot hole that just you have never been able to get over that you think was a complete mess up? Be interested to hear what you think as to what their biggest narrative mistake is. So let me know what you think in the comments down below. In the meantime, feel free to click any of the things on screen in front of you, the videos, Patreon, subscribe, all of that stuff. Click it if you like, don't click if you don't want to, and I will see you for the next one. Toodaloo.